It's solo time. We're doing a solo episode today. And, I don't actually know when this is going to air. I should have looked at that, but whatever, here we are. I am going to do a little bit of a catch up quickly, and then we're going to talk about the back end business of everything within my page, my content, my podcast, all of it. It's like technically my LLC is Freckled Foodie, but when I say my business, I don't feel aligned to that anymore. So I don't know, Cameron Oaks Rogers, whatever. Um, Quick catch up. December is fucking crazy. Like I just feel so goddamn overwhelmed. And I'm really, really, really trying to not let the chaos get to me and like focus on controlling the controllables and actually enjoying the holidays. Like I want to enjoy the holidays. I love the holidays. And there's nothing I love more than witnessing holiday joy and cheer through my kids' eyes, like my toddler especially because he's like aware of what's happening. He's so obsessed with Christmas decorations, and to just see the light in his eyes and the excitement is so refreshing. And that's what I want to tap into. But the minutia of everything that goes on behind the scenes is so much in general, and then adding kids on top of it. And yeah, it's madness over here. And you know what? I hate whoever created Elf on the Shelf. Not that I do it, I don't partake. But whoever did this, why? Why did we need to add another thing for parents during the holiday season? Like, I just don't get it. Why was that necessary? So, for anyone who's feeling like they have to do all of these things, you don't have to. You get to decide what you want to do. I hope this episode comes out before Christmas. I think it does. But you get to decide what you want to do when it comes to the holidays. Like, Christmas cards not happening. That doesn't bring me joy. It doesn't bring my kids joy. Like, there's no bonus for them. So, if there's no bonus for them and it doesn't bring me joy, I'm not doing it. Elf on the Shelf, sure, I think my toddler actually would enjoy it, but I am confident that we will create other memories that will be of equal importance and excitement that will not take that back end work of every single day remembering to put the said elf anywhere. And also, like, I don't love the idea of some random little man spying on us. Okay, today's episode is all about business. And the first thing I want to say is when I posted the story and asked you all if you had any questions about this, I guess I said, like, I'm going to do an episode on my business. If you're not watching on YouTube, you're not seeing this, but I did air quotes. And someone responded and was like, bitch, why are you air quoting business? Like, you run a business. And I think that that is a very prominent underlying theme for me that I need to continue to work on in therapy, of like taking myself legitimately and taking what I do legitimately, because financially it's fucking legitimate. Time, it's fucking legitimate. But there's some roadblock for me. And I think that that's partially, I'm not going to blame everything on the patriarchy, but it is interesting that influencing and content creation is a predominantly female industry. And there's such this like look down on it of like, oh, you're an influencer. What do you just take a picture of yourself? But any male who does it has like a media company. So why is that so different? Like if you look at the big males in this industry, they're considered like media moguls. And then if you look at the big influencers who are females, they're like, yeah, she just like takes selfies. And I have a lot to say about that. And I think that there's such a misunderstanding from the outside of what goes into everything on the back end of content creation. And I know there's like that viral sound of like, you try being an influencer for a day. I'm never going to act like this job is hard. It's a lot. It can be time consuming. It's a lot of work, but it's awesome. Like I'm so blessed that this is my job, and I'm so blessed that I get to do something that I completely and utterly enjoy. Obviously, okay, that's not true. There are parts of it that I don't enjoy, but obviously it's a job. But I get so excited by it, and I wake up wanting to do more. Like the fact that I dream of being able to just spend like 48 hours in an office by myself to work, I think shows that like I really love my job. Also that I probably have a addiction to work. Another thing I'm working on in therapy. But I think until you witness everything that's happening for content creators on the back end, it's really easy to be like, oh, what an easy job they have. Again, we're not doing brain surgery. We're not doing heart surgery. We're not teaching the youth in the classrooms. Like, this is not a hard job in comparison of things, but it does take a lot of work. And there's something for me that I still have to like get over of the misconception of that and believing that like, yeah, I actually do have a business. By all means, if you look at it, there's a full fucking business happening here. So why can't I just own that? I'm going to start from the beginning because I think it like plays into the journey. And I realize I haven't actually said this entire story in a long time. I was being interviewed for an episode as a guest recently and I told it. I was like, wow, I don't think I've shared that on my page in a very long time. So if you've heard this story, buckle in. If you haven't, here is how I got to where I am today. Basically, in 2013, I graduated from college and I had been interning at JP Morgan in sales and trading for the prior 2 summers, and I had gotten a full-time offer. And before I had started those internships, I vividly remember having this lunch with my mom the summer before sophomore year. And she was like, okay, just so you know, like next year you need a real internship. Like you need to get a job that will lead into a career after school. Because at that time I had been coaching lacrosse and like I knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do for my career. So I really wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I loved the idea of being on TV. I loved having a microphone. Hello, full circle. I loved talking about sports. I loved everything about that. So I applied to every sports broadcasting program, ESPN, Fox Sports, NBC Sports, like you name it. And I was putting in an application for their internship. And my mom, who had come from investment banking, and my dad, who worked in the credit card industry, were both like, I think you should try sales and trading. It really fits like your vibe and character. And why not just apply to one? So I said, okay, fine, I'll apply to one. And I applied to JP Morgan. And that process was just faster than all the others. Not that I got offers from any of the sports media companies, but whatever. So I interned at JP, and then that's where I started working post-college. While I was there, I really did love my job. Like I loved the competitiveness of it. I loved the team aspect. I loved the intensity, and I had a really incredible career path ahead of me, and I was doing really well. I think it just really helped. Like my characteristics and my strengths really played into succeeding in that industry. Was I the smartest one on the team? Abso-fucking-lutely not. But I was in sales and I love talking to people and I love connecting and it worked for me. That being said, all of the things that were my strengths that allowed me to succeed there were also character traits that got heightened to a degree that like I didn't love about myself. So I became a way more anxious and intense and fast-paced and like could not chill human. And along all of this, I was dealing with digestive health issues that were eventually figured out to be tied into mercury poisoning. But also, I think it was just like the anxiety and the fast pacedness of everything. And when I was dealing with these digestive health issues, I was going on all these elimination diets and I was getting so frustrated because I was having to figure out like, how do I order food places without any of these ingredients? And also I was spending so much money on food that I started cooking for myself. When I started cooking for myself, I started meal prepping. And again, the intention of all of this was positive. I really wanted to like get to the root cause of my digestive health issues and actually just like save money and eat foods that made me feel good. The impact was that I became like overly obsessed with what I was eating and also exercise. So like there was a slew of orthorexia in there. But along all of this, I became really interested in cooking and wellness. And this was kind of the birth of the wellness era. This was like 2016. Food porn accounts were just starting. Wellness influencers were like kind of becoming a thing. There were like 10 at the time that everyone knew. It was like, I won't actually say their names, but it was like these 10 people that if you followed a wellness influencer, you were following all of them. And some of them are still big to this day. And I just was like so enthralled by it. And every day I'd sit down at my desk and the first thing I would do would go on like Well and Good, Mind, Body, Green, Eater, Infatuation, not caring at all about Muni Bonds, which was the product I was selling. And that was my first like, oh, this is interesting. Like I care a lot more about this. And I thought maybe if I start a food account, I could do this, but more so it was like maybe I'll get free meals from my favorite restaurants, quite honestly. So I started the account Freckled Foodie. My face was never on it. My name wasn't on it. I didn't tell anyone except for Lucy and Joe. And then a few months later, I think my friend Deanna found it and was like, is this you? And I was like, oh, yeah. And then I kind of was just public about it. But again, it was very separate from me. Like if you saw it, you wouldn't know who I actually was. And I'm going to date myself. This was like pre-Instagram stories even existed. Like no one was talking to the camera. So it was all food, whether it be restaurants or like meal prep. And meal prep was a huge part of my life at the time because again, there was this like bit of orthorexia, but also I was on these elimination diets. So like there was a reason why I was prepping all of my meals. I had like gotten a fridge for my boss's office so that I could keep all my meals in there. Like I was doing the most and I just kept fucking doing the most because when I think back to this, I don't even know how I was alive. Um, I guess this was like my energy pre-children. I don't know. But I was waking up at like 4:30 in the morning to work on content, to get to the gym by 5:30, to get to my desk by 6:45, to stay at work until 5:30, to come home to work on Freckled Foodie stuff until like 8 or 9. And then all week, I'd prepare this like idea of a menu. And then on Saturday, I would go out and get all of the groceries needed because I would have taken orders from my friends to see like who wanted these meals. This is fucking insane when I think back on this. And I have to find photos because I honestly can't believe I did this in a New York City apartment while working a corporate job. But I would cook all weekend long. And then on Sunday, people would come to the apartment to like pick up the meals that I prepped. Insane. Fucking insane. And so I started doing that, and along that, I was also, like, making content of what I was prepping, and it started to feel like, "I wanna do more, I wanna do more, I wanna do more, but I don't have the time." And then it was the summer, and I felt like maybe I could get my name out there at the beach. So there's this, like, main strip of our beach town where everyone walks in the morning, like, it's packed, and I would spend all weekend, like, getting the groceries, everything ready. I had ordered, like, plastic cups, I was taping on my labels, I had this, like, banner sign that, like, screen printed Freckled Foodie, and I would fill up coolers with, like, pre-made breakfasts, whether it be, like, smoothies or overnight oats or chia puddings or, like, egg bites. Honestly, this is fucking insane the more I talk about it. Talk about not ever wanting to sit still and being addicted to work. And I would fill the coolers with them, put them in my dad's Defender, and go to the main street and just like hand them out. Like I wasn't even selling them. I was simply handing them out to be like, hey, follow Freckled Foodie. I don't really know what the point of it was, but I was determined and wanted to do something. And then the police like shut me down, which sounds so insane. But the cops like came up and they were like, you don't have a food permit. And I did, in fact, ask them, like, what's the difference between this and a lemonade stand if I'm not even charging? But they then were like, lady, come on, just like shut it down. Luckily, a woman who had walked by a few times was like, hey, I own a town and shop. I own a town and shop. I own a shop in town and we have a license to sell food. Like, why don't you just do this on our front porch? So I set up a breakfast stand on the front porch of her boutique in town and would like sell these breakfasts I was making. Again, insane that I was doing this on the weekends when like that was my downtime from working such an intense job, but I really have just always been a go, 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 I guess, unable to sit still. But really what it is like I fully believe in myself and I always have. And I have a very intense work ethic. I said this to someone recently, like I will outwork anyone you put me in a room with. And I fully and always believe that. And that plays into a second part of this story of when I eventually left my job. But basically it just felt like there were 10 every time it felt like every time I opened a door, there were 10 more doors behind it. And I never had time because I truly didn't have time. I was burning the candle on both ends to open any more doors. And I remember thinking like, God, I wish I could do this. But we didn't know what influencers were back then. It wasn't like today where that's like a common thing and people were talking about how much money they were making and you knew you could even make money. Also, like caveat, I did not have a lot of followers. I really am trying to figure out how to find the number of followers I had at a certain point in like time, and I don't know how to do that. But I think I had around like 5,000 followers. Maybe I don't even think that. And so there was no money being made on my account. And alongside this, I was also in school at IIN online to become a health coach. To do what with? I don't know. But again, your girl couldn't sit still. So with all of this, and planning a wedding because it was the year we were engaged. I kept saying, I feel like I'm running with a blindfold on and I'm going full speed and I'm going to hit a wall, but I don't know when. So I'm just going to keep going. I said that over and over and over to people. And then I didn't hit a wall, but a car hit me. So I was crossing the street in Brooklyn. I was going to yoga class. I did all of the right things. I had the crosswalk. I wasn't on my phone. I looked both ways. Like I did everything in my power that I was supposed to do. And a car fucked up and hit me. And I suffered from a pretty bad concussion. It was my sixth one, so my symptoms were really intense. And I had to go on disability from work. I thought I was going to miss like 2 days. It ended up being, I want to say 2 full months because my neurologist was very intense about me not having symptoms for a certain amount of time because of the intensity and computer staring of my job. And during that time, all I could really do is like talk to people on the phone, meditate, journal, reflect. And that's when I started meditating. That's when I really deepened my journaling practice. And it really forced me to think about my life and like, what am I doing? And if I'm not happy with what I'm doing, why am I still doing it? And so much privilege is involved in this. It's always so important for me to acknowledge that. Like, the financial privileges I come from allowed me to graduate school without student debt, which allowed me to then save money from the job I was making, which allowed me to then build this nest, which allowed me to eventually leave my job. I also have to always caveat that, like, yes, I was very intense about figuring out how I could leave my job, and I'll get into that. But I had such an insane privilege of knowing if I ever really failed, I had my parents. And not everyone has that. And I think it's really important to note because I don't love the like, chase your dreams and see what happens and you'll be fine because not everyone will be fine and not everyone has that privilege. So I had that and I went with it. Um, I remember sitting down and thinking like, okay, how can I make money from this? What would that look like? And I built out this business model of sorts because I love a fucking spreadsheet that was like, I could charge X amount for health coaching. I could charge X amount for grocery walkthroughs and kitchen audits. I could charge X amount for meal prepping in home. I could charge X amount for a sponsored post. And if I did XYZ amount of all of those things a month, I could make this amount of money. And I went through all of my financials and I was like, how much money do I typically spend a month? How much money do I need every month to like maintain my life as it is? And how much do I have savings? And how much of my savings am I willing to dip into to try to make this a thing? So I created this whole model and I sat Joe down because at this point we were engaged. So it was about to be like all of our money blended together. And I remember pitching him this idea and his response was like, if you were someone that I never saw go after things and had to be like picked up off of the couch to go do something for work or didn't have any motivation, I'd be concerned because you're really going from 0 hoping to go to 100. But your work ethic is maniac and I believe in you. So do it. And I had his full support. And I remember going out with my parents. Actually, I think it was just my dad to tell them I wanted to do this and get their guidance, I guess. Like, not necessarily their blessing because they weren't like fronting any of this, but I obviously wanted them to support me. And my dad was a little like, I mean, I believe in you, but I think they were both just like, what the fuck are you doing? I honestly would love to ask them now, like what they really thought. My mom was definitely more hesitant, and that had more to do with like her navigating her emotions of leaving the industry when she did and maybe wishing she had waited for certain things. But eventually I decided I was going to do it. I went back after disability. I remember sitting my boss down. I will never forget. I still have dreams about it every single week when I'm anxious. And I was like, I've had such a great career here, and immediately he thought I was going to a competitor. And I was like, no, I'm actually going to like do this thing on my own, this Instagram thing. And to bring you back a step, like everyone in my group at JP knew about my account. Like I told everyone, they all knew. I remember asking my manager, like, hey, I'm kind of just like trying to dot all of my I's and cross my T's. Like for the licenses that I held within FINRA, you need to like claim any outside income. So I was like, should I be claiming this? Like if I get something small, because I think I had like one small brand deal. And I remember him being like, it's babysitting money. No one cares. Oh man, what a diss. And I was like, okay. So he looked at me like I had 10 heads, and that didn't feel great. And I think I'll just leave it at that. I won't get into the rest of it because there's still clearly a lot of like shit that I wish I had. What's the right word? Wolf, what's the word when you like get, like, say you break up with someone and you get closure? I wish I had closure on certain things that I'll never have, and that's fine. But that's probably why I have anxiety nightmares about quitting this job all the time. But I will say that my team was all like, no shit, this is what you should be doing, and like, way to go, and supportive. And I still message with a lot of my old team members and my old clients, honestly. And I think it was so obvious to them because I didn't fucking care about muni bonds. I can tell you that much. Every day they had a timer on when I was allowed to start talking about what we were ordering for lunch, because if it were up to me, we'd be talking about it since the day the moment we sat down at the desk. I was constantly being like, okay, what did you guys have for dinner last night? What restaurant are you going to? Do you want me to pick out a restaurant for you? This is what you should be doing. Like, that was what I cared about. And connecting with people on a deeper level, which is what I think this has all turned into. So then I left. I wrote up this whole thing about like all the services I would offer. I sent it to literally everyone I knew. And I was like, here's a draft email of what you can say about me and who I am and all of this stuff. Forward it to anyone you think would care. And from there, it became this spider web. And I created this roster of clients where I was literally cooking for them in their homes. Now, if you follow Wishbone Kitchen and you know like that private chef work, literally could not be farther from what I was doing. Like, I was doing bare minimum cooking. I'm not like a trained chef by any means. But I was figuring out as I went. And I did that for around 6 months alongside of like health coaching and some other things that I was just trying to make ends meet and like make money where I could and create content. And I realized I didn't want to be in that type of service in-home client-facing industry. I didn't want to scale that business in any way. Like, that overwhelmed me. And I really enjoyed the content side of things, because after I quit, I started sharing more about like my journey. And that was when stories became a thing and talking to the camera. And I remember Lucy being like, if you ever talk to the camera, I will literally delete your account. And I'm like, I would never. Look at me now. And I started sharing about my mental health struggles, because that's when my anxiety was really bad and I was going through some stages of depression. And that was when I started connecting with people more. So from there, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do another leap of faith and just dive fully into content. And that was around, sorry, I forgot. When I quit, that was May of 2018. And then add 6 months. So like beginning of 2019 was when I was like, let's just go full content. So I literally took notes, which I'm like so impressed by myself, but I do have notes to remember all of the things I want to say. Beginning of 2019, I started focusing solely on content. And again, Instagram stories were a thing, but they were only 15 seconds. And I can fucking yap, as you know. And I wanted to talk more. And I felt like I had this incredible community of people in my life who were so interesting and had such amazing things to say. And I wanted to talk to them and like share our conversations. And so that's when I started a podcast in March of 2019. And when I started it, I had no idea what it would become, but I spent hours on YouTube learning like what products to use, how to edit, how to release, how to upload, like all of the things. So I was recording, editing, producing all on my own. And I'll get into this more in a second when we talk about like hiring people, but I wholeheartedly believe that before you hire out, and hiring out is so important to grow a business, but before you hire out, you should know how to do that person's work. You're not going to be able to do it probably to the caliber that they're doing it, because that's why you're hiring out, because they're more of a like specialist in that field. But I am so grateful that like I know if all else fails, I know how to run the show. I could do this entire thing on my own. I wouldn't need the studio. I wouldn't need the network. I wouldn't need any of it. Like, if all else fails, I can do it. And I think that's so important when hiring people, because there are going to be days where someone's going to miss a deadline, or someone's going to be sick, or there's going to be extenuating circumstances, and you're going to have to do the said task, and you want to know how to do it. So I started all on my own. There was a stint where I was recording in the Samsung studio because of like a partnership that I had kind of had with them. And then in November 2022 is when I joined Dear Media. And that was the first time I actually made money on the show. So for March, April, May, June, July, that's a long time, 3.5 years. Am I doing the math right? Yeah. I did the show without making any money. It didn't cost me money because, again, I was doing it all on my own. I mean, that's not true. It cost me my time. But this was before it was video, so I wasn't having to like edit all the video and hire out for any of that. But I think I sold maybe like 3 ads on that show. And that's why one of the many reasons why joining Dear Media was such a huge deal for me, because it allowed me to monetize my show. And I will get into like the back end of monetization and all of that in a second. I'm just trying to really paint the picture. Along that time, I also slowly and steadily grew my social media. And there's one thing that I will consistently say about this is that I'm so grateful for the pace of which my growth happened. There's so many overnight, specifically in 2020, like TikTok era, rise to fame. And that honestly scares me a little bit because for many reasons, I just love that it has been a slow and steady journey for me because I think we've built such an incredible community with that. So along that ride, I think there were a few like turning points for my community. I think first was like when I got pregnant and I started the What the Fuck is Happening to My Body series because that reached a whole new demographic. And I look back on that now. I remember the first one I posted feeling so passionately about it. And I remember I got 50,000 views and I was like, I am literally a fucking star. Like, I remember that number being so high that I actually looked back recently because I was like, it must have been like 5 million. It wasn't 50,000 that I got that excited over, but it was. And I really love that perspective because now if something gets 50,000, I'm kind of like, okay. But no, like that is so many fucking people. Anyway, that was a turning point. And then I think postpartum was a turning point. Oh, before all of those, there was the like executive assistant era in Florida. That was a turning point for TikTok that got a new audience. And then I think joining Dear Media was a turning point. And I think having a second and like really coming into my own style of content and truthfully leaning away from food because it just wasn't interesting to me and following my passion and what lit me up and what I wanted to talk about was the final turning point in changing my name to Cameron Oakes Rogers and eventually the podcast name to Conversations with Cam because I just felt disconnected from Freckled Foodie. Food, honestly, nowadays is like the last thing I think about. I just wish someone could like give me a pill and give me all my nutrients. I'm so decision fatigued around food. So the idea of creating content all around food is honestly a nightmare for me. And I love not having a niche. And I fully believe that like in parts that has held me back in business, but in other ways, it has helped me flourish in business because I don't want to niche myself down. What I want to do is talk about things that I feel passionately about and that I feel will potentially help others and go from there. And that has always been my goal, to like help others feel like they're less alone and to feel seen and to feel heard and to share my honest journey. So now that you're here, oh, sorry, I forgot one thing. Along that ride, I did join management in 2020, which is when I started to make some money off of social content. So that's like what, 2 years after quitting around then. Yeah, because I remember it was like COVID 2020. So it was April or May. So 2 years. Within those 2 years, I was making ends meet. I was not at all making anything close to what I had made in my corporate job, but we just gotten married. Like Joe then became the breadwinner of our relationship and I had savings and I was making enough to like not have to completely dip into my savings through health coaching, meal planning, meal prepping, and like some digital downloads I was doing on my site and like a few random sponsored pieces. But joining with a management obviously helped me then get more sponsored opportunities. And then I joined with AIR, the current management I'm with, in 2022, which completely, in my opinion, shifted things and was like a huge turning point for my career in like really prioritizing what do I want to do? What do I want to create? Who do I want to be in this industry? And how do I want to reach those goals? Shout out Sydney, because you're my fucking favorite person ever. Okay. Now, the pillars of business. I did the math, and I'm honestly proud of myself for doing all of this within QuickBooks and spreadsheets. So someone asked, and I'll just answer that now while we're talking about money, is if I make more currently than I did at my corporate job. And yes, 2021 was the year that I started making more than the salary I left at my corporate job. And I don't love this about myself, but I'm going to say it. Like, I am absolutely numbers obsessed and numbers driven, and it's constantly something I'm working to let go of. But I think, not to make this a therapy session, but so much of my drive and work ethic and commitment to want to show up and, I don't know, prove something is that I do have a chip on my shoulder of feeling like I don't want people to think things were just handed to me because of the privileges I come from. And I'm the first person to admit that, like, privilege and hard work can coexist. But I also think that there are circumstances where there's no privilege and it's simply hard work, and that's not my case. And then there are circumstances where there's privilege and no hard work. And I always felt like I wanted to prove that I was working and not that things were handed to me. So do I come from a ton of financial privilege that gave me a leg up? 110%. I will never deny that. I will always admit it. It's at the forefront of everything I talk about. And because duality exists, I work my fucking butt off. So because of that, I play this evil game in my head of like, well, what would I be making if I was still at JP Morgan? So I did, in fact, text my old work wife, and I was like, hey, can you tell me what you made when you were at X level? Because she has since left also, but she was there in the level of like what I would be now. And she gave me the number. And 2023 was the number or the year that I made the same as what I would be making had I stayed. And I believe 2024, I will be making more than what I had been making had I stayed, which is fucking insane. And I'm fully going to admit that. It's insane. And I'm really proud of myself. But I also want to very clearly state, I do not think that I should be making more money than a nurse, than a doctor, than a teacher. Like, I'm not saying that I don't deserve to be making the money I'm making, but those jobs deserve to be paid more. And I will leave it at that. So the pillars of my business, I'll now get into the back end of it. There's sponsored content. So all of the content that you consume on my Instagram and my TikTok is a mix of majority, just general content, and then sponsored content. General content, I do in a very haphazardly, talk to the phone, FaceTime, not planning ahead way. There's been a lot of pressure on myself and from others to be more organized in that manner, and it's just not how I operate. It's not the content that does well when it is planned, and it's not what feels authentic to me. And I will say, how many times can I mention TBM on this show? Goddamn. But the To Be Magnetic course I've taken, I have worked on my authentic code, and like for 2025, everything I do is being filtered through that code of authenticity. And you know what? Let me just share it right now because I have it. So I worked on this in the course. I will link TBM in the show notes, but I sent this to my manager, everyone on my team. We will get into my team, I promise. I have notes. I swear I will land this fucking plane on everything I say I'm doing. And everything is going through this authentic code. So the first is comfort. I value the feeling of comfort in my own skin, comforting others, providing a space for people to feel comfortable, a soothing source in human form for my kids. Like, comfort is key to me. Connection and community, encouraging deep connection with people, providing a space for others to connect, encouraging vulnerability, allowing people to be themselves, prioritizing the people I love and doing anything for them, helping others. So making people feel safe, seen, heard, validating people's feelings and emotions, giving back and volunteering, and using my privileges. And then humor, fun, and joy, laughter, playing, feeling led up, and enjoying myself. So that is the filter that everything is going through in terms of work. So when I'm doing my general content, a lot of it is just like, what pops up in my head, pick up my phone, let's go. Sponsored content, how that works is I have a management team, AIR. They will either pitch out or we will get pitched. Typically, I feel it's like 70% we're getting pitched, 30% we're pitching out. And we'll get a pitch that says, hey, I'll just use like this coffee. It's a matcha, but whatever. I'll use this as an example. A matcha brand comes to them. Hey, we would love to work with Cameron. We want to do XYZ deliverables. So it could be 1 TikTok, 1 Instagram, 5 stories, whatever, over X amount of time. And can you tell us her rate? It could also be very specific of this matcha brand. Hey, we have a holiday campaign where we're launching a new line of something, or hey, we are having a party and we want Cameron to come and like share about it. So it could be very specific, or it could be a longer term partnership. We've done one up to a year where every month the deliverables are different. That is my ideal. Like, I don't like doing, and we rarely accept, honestly, I feel like we don't anymore, one-off stories. I want to work with a brand for at least 6 months and every month do something different. So month 1, we do like Instagram stories introducing the brand to my community. Month 2, we do an Instagram reel and a story set. Month 3, maybe we move it over to TikTok. Month 4, maybe we do a dedicated podcast, So I love doing that and sprinkling it in within everything. But once we get that outreach from the brand, my management then negotiates with them. I'm not involved in that negotiation. Once I give the okay, they negotiate. We finally decide on a rate. They deal with the contract. I officially get the sign off on the contract, and then we get a brief. And from that brief, it's like, here are the talking points. Here's what we're looking for. Some are super specific, which I don't like. And some are like, do your thing. Just make sure you're hitting these XYZ points. That is what performs the best, brands, if you were ever listening. And from there, I film the content. We submit it, we get any feedback, reviews, edits, and then we post it, and then we share the analytics, and then we are paid. That's how sponsored content works. So sponsored content is 50% of my income, and that is across Instagram, TikTok, and my newsletter. The podcast is completely separate. That is with a separate team. Dear Media runs all the ads on my show. It runs in a similar manner where they have a sales team that's working with brands and filling out my calendar. There are a certain amount of ads we will run per episode. They're reaching out to brands like, hey, are you interested in buying into the show? Or brands are reaching out to them. They send it to me. Do you approve? Yes, no. We get the rate. We officially go into contract. I then record every podcast ad on a certain day the week prior to the show based on the briefs that I have. Submit them, they get plugged into the episode goes live, we get paid. The podcast is 20% of my income. I would love for this to be a higher number because it's something that I enjoy so much, so that is a goal for 2020. The back end work of the show is way more than I think anyone is aware of or I ever could have imagined, and it takes up a lot of my time. I enjoy it so much, but that's why I wish it was more of the income, because I'll get into the expenses in a second. Then there's affiliate. So this is non-sponsored, but say I'm wearing these Levi's jeans that I bought that I love, and I have a link through a LTK, a Shop My, or a Split, and I share it on my stories. If you buy through that link, I get a percentage of sales. The percentage depends on the brand and the platform I'm using. Similarly, a brand could give me a code to share, and I would get X amount of sales if you just use that code. Affiliate does pretty well for me. I'm not going to lie. Like, this number actually shocks me when I sat down and did it. Another big affiliate driver is my Amazon affiliate, because a lot of like motherhood and kids things are on there, whether it's like, I don't know, like changing tables or bottles or shit that we need with kids. And affiliate is 20% of my income. And I meant to say this, but with sponsored content, my management is taking a percentage, a set percentage of every deal. And with podcast, my network is taking a set percentage of every deal. Affiliate, I am taking 100% home. Then there is like non-sponsored content, which is like IG subscription, and TikTok gives you out like a payout depending on if your video's over a minute, how many people are watching it, how many people are engaged with it. I honestly still don't understand the metrics. I never understand the numbers. I don't ever rely on that money because I haven't made substantial money doing it, and it doesn't always make sense to me. but that percentage is 3% of my income. Then there's Substack, which is my subscription-based newsletter, and that is 7% of my income. And then my product, Quiet Your Mind and Busy Your Hands, to be determined. I'll get into the cost of all of that and that business, but we've only been running it for like 2 months, so I don't really have like a percentage for you of the income. Now, actually, let's just talk about the product for, hold on, let me see how I want to do this. I will say the Quiet Your Mind and Busy Your Hands is like a pillar of my business that I want to grow. I want to make many more editions. I want to make many more products under this pillar. I think that there's so much incredible work to be done there, and I feel so passionately about it. And it's been so fucking insanely well received by you all that like it's lit this fire in me and belief in doing what I want and believe in and finding, and the people will find who also want the same thing. Like I truly built this because I wanted this journal, and clearly other people resonate. That being said, I was not at all expecting all of the work that would be necessary for this. A ton of investment up front, whether it's, yes, buying the product, but designing the product, hiring people, whether it be hiring someone to design the interior or the text, hiring someone to design the imagery, having the publisher to create the actual product, testing it, all of the shipping, all of the actual like unit costs, the photographing, the video aspects, the resetting up the website, all of the back-end business logistics of it, getting sales tax permits, filing for trademarks, like so much. And I think that this is where it's lost when influencers create businesses alongside their content, the back-end logistics of it. Like I never thought I would be wearing so many hats in a million freaking years. And I always said this in the beginning, if anything never comes of this, it's like I went to business school because I'm learning how so many things operate that I never would have had an opportunity to learn. And even like the accounting aspect of things, like all of it has been so eye-opening to me. And that gets into talking about my team. So I, again, fully believe that hiring out someone who can do the work faster and better than you is going to get you farther. That being said, you should know how to do the minimum of what they're doing. I'm not going to know what my accountant does. Like that's not realistic. I don't have a CPA, but I know how QuickBooks works and I know kind of what we're putting things under. I can run the P&Ls. Like I know how to do those things. That being said, me in the weeds of QuickBooks every single day and dealing with taxes is not a good use of my time or my energy. And it also makes me feel so fucking dumb and I hate it. So with that, I have grown my team to hire out people to help me with things. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm swatting this little gnat because it's driving me insane. So I have my management, and that is Air. Shout out Sydney and Carly. They are the people I'm with talking to every single day who are helping me think about strategically how I want to do everything, but then also helping with every single partnership under the sun. And then I have a new right hand who's been with me now for like 3.5 months. And someone asked if anyone is full-time or contracted. Right now, no one is a full-time employee, but they're all like part-time freelance contract 1099 individuals. That being said, my right hand, we are trying to bring on full-time because it is a full-time role, quite honestly. And like, I really want that because I think there's so much growth opportunity for us in 2025, and that will be a huge turning point for us. So my right hand helps with honestly everything. She is submitting all the sponsor content to management. She's the one who's posting all the sponsor content. She's helping with back end linking for affiliate. She is helping with scheduling. She's helping with some recording of content, whether it be organic or sponsored. She's just in the weeds with me and doing everything. She is also now running the Conversations with Cam Instagram and TikTok and helping like with ideation for those things. Then there's Chloe, who's been on the show, who I've talked about a lot. And I'm not naming my right hand because I'm respecting her privacy at this time, given that she still has a full-time corporate job. And then Chloe is how do I even explain Chloe? Okay, Chloe's been on the show before, so I will link that show if you want to listen to it. But she is someone who now has an incredible creative agency with Lydia, who's amazing, called at Darlington. And she helps me in the sense of like, what are some trending audios? What are trending sounds? How do we use this trend and apply it to my content? Or like if we have a big shoot, like what's the mood board? What's the inspo? That's not how my brain works. I've never been that like type of creative, and she is a fucking genius. So she helps with all of that. I then have a show right hand, Amelie, who I actually play college lacrosse with, which is so fun for us. And she is the one who is taking all of the recordings, making our edits in the platform Descript, and then also writing all of the description, show notes, show titles, everything for every episode. So just quickly for back end of podcast work, what happens is if it's a solo, this starts from here. If it's not a solo, obviously we have a list of guests that we want, or we get a ton of pitches. We schedule a guest after pitching or accepting a pitch. We research the guest. We have the interview. After the interview, all of the content gets sent to Dear Media. Dear Media uploads the audio file into this platform where we basically get the transcript of the show. We go through, we make any edits. Honestly, we don't edit a lot at all, but we make any edits there. Amelie does the show notes for the episode, giving like the title, the description, all of that, linking anything necessary. I approve all of that. Then my producer, Carolina at Dear Media, makes all of the edits, plugs in all of the ads that I have then recorded, and releases it. Alongside that, we have Julia, who does all of the video editing for the show. And this is a newer thing because now podcasts have become like video forward as well. So once we get the video content, she gets it. She's the one that's slicing it into the trailers. I'm typically sending her an email of like, hey, this is what I think would make a good trailer, this talking point, that talking point, whatever. She's editing it down. We're sending back edits. She's giving us the finals. And then she's also editing down the main video based on our edits in the transcript on how to upload it into YouTube and then uploading it there. So that is all the back end of the show. And then there are other freelancers that are more, well, I guess, yes, monthly, my accountant, but then more one-offs would be like my legal team if I need them for something, whether we're working on like trademarks or LLC documents or more nitty-gritty contracts that are abnormal than what we're used to seeing. PR, who is on retainer every once in a while, depending on like if there's a big project we're working on, like Quiet Your Mind and Busy Your Hands. We've brought PR back on because I think that that's just like the most beneficial thing to try to get it in front of more people. And then if there's a big project, you know, there are people who I'll bring on like a photographer, a videographer. Obviously, there's like makeup that's being done. There's design, like Hannah, who designed the imagery for the journal and coloring book. So that all kind of varies, but all of those people are freelance 1099 contractors. Someone asked about like the largest expense. So freelance is every contractor I just mentioned that I hire is 20% of my revenue. So it's a legitimate expense. It's not small. And then legal and professional services, which is more like legal, lawyers, PR, accounting, that's 8% of the revenue. And then the only other overhead I have is like office supplies and software. Again, I'm excluding the journal at this point. But office supplies and software, which would be like what I pay for monthly subscriptions of things that on the back end help a business run, like a QuickBooks or a ManyChat or any of those platforms. That's just 1% of revenue. So a very small fee, which plays into how I was able to kind of make this into a career in the beginning because there really was no overhead. I didn't have any people that I had hired. It was just me and there was no overhead cost. It was just my time. All that being said, I want to get into some of your questions. What are some surprises? For me, one of the big surprises this year is like how much the expenses can add up at a certain level when you add in a team, because it becomes like the more money you're making, the more things you want to do, the more people you need, the more you're spending. And that's something that I've had to accept and come to terms with and not get greedy with, because I fully believe that the more people that are assisting you when you hire correctly, the more growth opportunity you have. And yes, it's an investment, but like it's such a necessary and important investment if you want to get to the next step. And I don't feel we hear or see enough about this from creators. And so we almost believe, like I made this joke to Joe the other day where I was like, it's like Alex Earl, like, does she even have anyone working for her? And he's like, of fucking course. That is the worst example, Cameron. And he's right, but like we don't see it, we don't hear about it. So as a creator, I believe like all these people are doing things on their own, where in reality, I know that there's no way they are. Not all of them, but many of them. So I just wasn't prepared for like the expenses of things. I also was not prepared for the amount of back-end computer work for certain things. So I think maybe it's me. Maybe I like being in the weeds of things. I think that could be it. Like I love computer work. I love admin. That's not true. I feel safe doing admin and computer work because it's something I know. It feels like I'm in my comfort zone. It's just like blah, 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 blah. And it's very like task check off complete. And I fucking love that. Like I love a to-do list that I can check off. And I spend a lot of time like emails, back-end computer work, whether that's like DMs, honestly, or like the linking of things or the editing of things or the creating of text for like Substacks or back-end logistics of the show. Like a lot of back-end computer work that I was not expecting. We talk about the financials of things. An accountant is someone I just brought onto my team. So like before that, I was in the weeds of QuickBooks and a spreadsheet every single day, documenting everything and figuring all of that out. Not a good use of my time, but I did feel safe there. But then I realized this is not smart. And then also the biggest surprise is just like needing to know things that are completely different roles and completely outside of the industry you thought you were joining, whether it be like, again, the tax and accounting of a new product. Like I'm talking with my accountant and she's like, okay, well, like, why isn't there sales tax? I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like, am I supposed to be collecting sales tax? She's like, yes. I'm like, okay, now what? What do I do? She's like, you need a sales tax permit. I'm like, how do I do that? So many things like that I would have had no idea that I would have ever had to know. And again, that's not necessarily like content creation, but it does play into certain things. That's more so like when you create a product. And then when it comes to content creation, there are so many different roles. Like you're taking a brief, you're writing a script, you're then acting, you're producing, you're editing, you're publishing. Like something that if a media company or a brand were doing it, there would be a different person hired for every role. A content creator is wearing a lot of the times every single hat. What are you glad that you did in hindsight? The biggest thing is learning how to do something before hiring out. Like I'm just so glad that I did that and continue to do that. And then hiring out for someone that can do something, whatever that task is, better than me and faster than me, because like time is fucking money. And I want to create not perfect, but the best thing that we can. And that's not always something that I can do alone. Rarely is something I can do alone. The other thing that I'm grateful I did is I never let perfection get in the way of progress. From day one, I was like, I'm going to show up the way that I am. And if it's not what people like, I actually don't fucking care. Like, I'm not going to set this precedent that I have to look a certain way, that I have to have my makeup done, that I have to have my hair done, that everything has to be perfect. Like, that's not my reality. And if I set that precedent, I'll never show up. And I'm glad that I've never set that precedent because now I can continue to show up how I am. Do you have a mentor and do you get lonely? I definitely was lonely in the beginning of this career because I went from such a team-focused job to like myself. But what has drastically helped and improved is A, the team that I've kind of created, but B, people in my life who are so successful in this industry, who are expanders for me, who I'm close with and friends with and use as sounding boards. So yes, we have personal friendships outside of business, but also checking in of being like, how do you do this? Who do you go to for this? Oh my God, this is so fucking annoying. Wow, this is amazing. Like having people that I have relationships with that are almost colleagues in the space that can be sounding boards or really just like resonate and understand what I'm experiencing, because my friends who aren't in this industry can't comprehend a lot of those things. They can't relate to it because it's not their lived experience. I also, with these people, am always asking questions and I'm always an open book. If someone wants to know how much I was paid to do a deal that's my friend in this industry, I tell them without question. Like, here you go. And I think that that is so important because it's the only way that all of us can succeed. Tips for starting out, I would say, number one, be yourself. Because if you're trying to be someone else, people are just going to follow the person that you're trying to be. Why would they follow a knockoff? Be yourself, stay true to your voice, create content that's true to you and that you care about. Like, it's so obvious when people are creating content that doesn't feel true to them or feels forced or isn't about something they're interested in, because you can just see it. You can experience it as the consumer. So create content that's true to you and people will find you. And then someone asked, what does a typical day look like and what is the most time spent on? Honestly, I wish I had like a typical day to explain, but every day is so freaking different. The main things are like the mornings are with my children. So I typically am like starting at 9, and that's really kind of the earliest. There are few and far days between where I catch like an earlier train if I need to get in, but 9 is typically my start time. And then if it's a city day, I'm coming into the city, I'm doing multiple recordings, I'm creating content within those like time blocks of being on the train and going between recordings. I'm in my DMs way more than I should be. I'm in my emails. I'm doing back-end logistics of work. I'm editing the content that I then recorded. I'm going through the content that's coming up for this week. You know, like my original content is not at all planned, but we obviously plan ahead for podcast content and for sponsor content and for content around other circumstances like gift guides, for instance. In my dream world, I would have designated like podcast recording days, and then I would have designated content filming days, and then I would have designated like content editing days. But because so much of my original content just comes at me out of nowhere and it's like a thought that I want to act on right away, I don't know if that's my ADHD or what, that is hard for me to do because then it limits me to that one day to film. So I do have a running note in my phone of like all the things I want to create content on. And then if I'm able to block off time of like, this is when I'm going to film, I try to go through that note, but I'm not always successful. I do, however, do that with sponsored content where like I will take one day, typically a week or every 2 weeks, to bang out like multiple partnerships that I have done, because that's just like better for the way that my mind works. If I know that this day I'm going to be filming everything, I'm not going to be going in between like all of the different hats. We're just going to film and then we will edit and submit at a later time. So honestly, I can't even explain what a typical day looks like because it's all different. And I don't know what the most time spent on would be, quite honestly. One other logistical question. Someone asked, you still make money from your website? My actual Cameron Oaks Rogers website? No. Like that was never a driving force for me. SEO was never a focus. I honestly don't post anything new on there. It's more of just like a landing place for my different pillars of business now. Substack, I do make some money on from subscription, but I don't make any money. Like maybe I wouldn't even, no. On my website, no, I'm not making money. And then what was the process of creating the journal like? I will finish with this question because this episode has gone way longer than I thought it would. But basically, for 3 years, I've had this idea of wanting to create a journal. Like I just felt like it was something I wanted to do and felt very called to, but I wanted to be very specific and I couldn't figure out how I was going to differentiate it. And then when I started doing more with my hands to quiet my mind in the way of coloring or cross stitching, I realized like, okay, this could be a really fun thing to do. And then I had this aha moment of like, what if we combined the two? And then around that same time, we happened to be approached by a publisher about the idea of creating a product with them. And I was like, wait, I actually do have an idea for this. And then in August, we were like, let's make this a fucking reality and fully send and like get this in ASAP so that we will have it by the holidays this year. So I had some emails and messages out to some graphic designers I knew. I ended up working with Hannah Sheridan, who's amazing. She has helped with like, honestly, I think every single merch drop we've had. And with that, I created all of the mantras, like it's all temporary on YouTube. I'm doing a little walkthrough. And she then thought of like, okay, what are some easy doodle type drawings that I can do? And like, how do they match up? And then we had a lot of meetings and notes and edits. And we eventually came out with 30 coloring affirmation images like this. I'm a badass. And then I created 30 journal prompts. And then I took that to Lydia at Darlington. And we were like, how do we make this flow into a journal? Like, can you help me with the design of the logo? And I created all the inner text. And we then submitted that all to the publisher. They then gave me options of like what the journal would actually look like. I was very specific. I wanted a hardcover, like that was my number one. And I wanted a spiral bound because I really wanted that just like ability for the user to turn this way and fold. It's hard to explain on a show that's not video. So if you're watching on YouTube, you understand. But I just wanted to be able to do this open and fold situation. The hardest thing for this was like all of the back end logistics and honestly a lot of investment financially and time and figuring out how much inventory we wanted to order. But it's been so incredibly well received and I'm so freaking proud of it. And I'm so excited for what's to come. I think going back to a question, like one of the hardest things for me with this type of work is planning ahead because I am so like spur of the moment that I think it can be beneficial, but I also miss opportunities because I'm not thinking enough ahead where the moment comes and I'm like, oh, I want to do this. But the reality is it takes a lot of planning and back end work to make it happen. So I've missed that opportunity. The other thing, just that I actually journaled about this morning, is the hardest thing for me is turning my brain off because with the work that I do, you can always do more and there's no cap on how much you can create or how much you can make. And as a work obsessed person, it's really easy to be like, but I want to do this, but I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that, and not shutting off my brain. And I had this moment this morning where I was like, if I'm making all of this content and making all this money and having this great business and I'm not ever actually enjoying the money in the time spent with my family and friends, then what is the fucking purpose? You need to shut off your brain. And I need to be okay with missed opportunities because everything has the potential to become content, but not everything needs to be an opportunity I take. And that's something that I'm just constantly reminding myself of. Like, for instance, I really want to take off between Christmas. Whoa, speech impediment. Between Christmas and New Year's. And that's something that I told myself I will do every year. However, the content side of my brain is like, but that's such good content. The traveling, the packing for kids, the being with your family. And that's where it's hard to be like, no. You need to set boundaries. Like, it's okay to just miss those opportunities. It's all right. Not everything needs to become something for work. So that's what I'm constantly working on. That was a very long episode and I threw a lot at you. I hope that was interesting. I would love to hear feedback on if this type of stuff is interesting to you because I do think that like it's not discussed enough, the back end aspects of these businesses. But that is my career in a nutshell. And maybe we'll do another recap at like the end of 2025. But thank you so much for listening. Someone did ask, like, how can we best support you? And I will say, like, rating and reviewing and sharing the show is the number one thing when it comes to the podcast. In terms of content, one thing I will note is, like, I feel like I'll post something and my DMs will be blown up with commentary around it. That's always more helpful if you're comfortable to put it in the comments of the content rather than my DMs. I will still see it. I promise. I'm in the comments even when I shouldn't be. And that just like helps the content. But I appreciate you being here so much. The fact that I get to do this for a career, I will never take for granted. And you guys are the best fucking community ever. So have a great day.